I'm Dr. Jennifer Obaseki.
Basically, the one thing that we've seen or heard today is about value. But when we look at the subject matter, which is how we ensure equality through with women in leadership post-pandemic, one of the things we mustn't overlook is the effect of the pandemic on Black women in the community. A lot of our frontline workers have passed away, and the fact that we are highly vulnerable should not be underestimated. Also, the additional challenges that the pandemic has brought around the areas of mental health cannot be overlooked. As a result, we have to combat these challenges and look towards how to secure the equality train. And one of the things that is needed, both sides, both in the Western world and also on the continent, is security in legislation. When a woman doesn't have the security of the law behind her, it's very hard for her even to achieve as a leader, talk less of a woman who's just managing to sustain herself and her family. So as a leader, one of the things, apart from your confidence, knowing your skill and your value, is to have the assurance of law. And for us as women to make sure that this happens, we have to be more invested in policy and in politics. As it was reflected earlier on by one of the speakers, we're not often represented in proportionate levels at the policy and decision-making level. Yes, it's good that we have a seat at the table, but we must also have a voice at the table and a voice that carries authority at the table. These things are very important. So we have to think about the cultural changes that are needed, political changes that are needed, social changes that are needed. And most of us, our first experiences of a discrimination tends to be not just from the home, but when we go out of our doors, it tends to be at school. And we've seen oft in Nigeria, even most recently, the abduction of yet a number of mass abduction of girls. We have to value our girls. One of the things we don't seem to be doing is valuing our girls, especially in a country where the age for marriage still is at the age of 14 legally in Nigeria. We have to think about putting in, as I say, legislation to protect us. Again, we've seen a very horrible case, I think last week, where a lady was thrown out of her home being a first wife. And a judge actually passed an order asking her to leave her own matrimonial home. Where was the evidence that allowed such an order for eviction? What I'm saying is that we have to be very, very much more invested as women. So challenge, and the theme of this year's International Women's Day, challenge, is apt. If we're going to see equality post-pandemic, we must stand up anytime we do see a level of adversity, inequality, and we mustn't be afraid to do so. Planning the challenge is important. You mustn't go into challenge unprepared. Often, yes, making a noise leads to change. But if you do the noise in a strategic way, with your evidence, with your policy, with your support backing you, then you have a lot more chance of making that change a lot sooner than would be ordinarily available. So what am I trying to say? In fact, this theme for this year is so apt. We've had the Me Too movement, we've had the Black Lives Matter. So when you think about being empowered to actually stand up and having your voice heard, the time is now. The previous speaker also spoke about the Sustainable Development Goals. When you look at what was actually set in Beijing all those years ago, the Westernized countries are lagging behind when it comes down to achieving equality for women and girls. And as a result of the pandemic, a lot more countries are still regressed. Psychologists have determined that one of the things and some of the attitudes post-pandemic will be people will begin to value their time and their causes a lot more discerningly. So what it's going to, I mean, the pandemic's going to cause a change in the cultural mindset of people when they're in their decision making, so they say. So in line with that, I would ask that we really do try to make sure that we sit up, be confident, make sure we're equipped for challenge, and be more invested as women in the policy and legal decisions around ourselves, our lives, and those of our daughters. It's been fantastic to hear from the millennials. I've actually been encouraged by them during this particular talk. Yes. I would like to give them a big round of applause because they have a lot more, they're a lot more educated, a lot more empowered, and they're a lot more impatient. So that impatience and that hunger for effective change is something we also, as older women, need to learn from them. So thank you very much.